Hello, everybody, and good morning, and good evening, or whatever time you're listening to this podcast. Good hit. I'm Matt Sainsbury. I'm the editor-in-chief of digitally-downloaded.net, as usual. And with me this week, we have Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
We have Ginny. Hello, Ginny.
Hey.
And we have Harvard. Hello, Harvard.
Hello.
So we've got an awful lot to talk about this week. Lots of games and stuff, and that's good because otherwise we wouldn't be doing much of a podcast. We'll listen to some Hatsune Miku, get everybody in a good mood, and then we'll come back and talk about the games of April. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so the games of April. It's a relatively quiet month next month, which surprised me a bit because last month was crazy busy, and I just would have expected it to continue to escalate through the year. But it looks like we've got a little bit of a break, relatively speaking, next month. So just running through what's coming out. On Nintendo Switch on April 3, Penny Punching Princess is shaping up to be pretty good fun. That's also coming out on the Vita, if you still play that, which is good. Continue to fight the good fight, Vita fans. Then we've got... Well, Animated Jigsaw's beautiful Japanese scenery. Looks like it's probably going to be Game of the Year. Masters of Anima, which actually looks like a decent little strategy game thing that comes out on April 10. Neo Atlas 1469 comes out on April 19. That's a light simulation game about navigating the world and stuff. And I played it on PC last year, and it's actually pretty good, and it'll work better on handheld console, I think. So that's one worth looking forward to. Nintendo Labo comes out on April 20, and we've talked about that a bit in the past, and that's an exciting thing. Galgun 2 comes out on April 24 in the countries where it's not going to be banned, and that's going to be a great game. We'll probably talk about that a bit more in a minute, but that's definitely my highlight for the month, I think. Musinx, Musynx, however you want to pronounce that. That comes out on April 24 as well. That's a rhythm game with an awful lot of music, and that should be good on Switch because Switch does rhythm good. That's about it for the Switch. Let's go over to the PS4, shall we? We won't bother with Xbox because there won't be anything. PS4. So... we have Minute. Minute is looking like a nice little indie game to kick things off on April 3. Masters of Anima also comes out on PS4, which is good for people who prefer to play on the TV. Or I guess you can do that with the Switch as well, but nobody does. God of War comes out on April 20. That's a big one from Sony, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that a bit in the future. Yeah, not much else to say about that. Galgun 2, April 24, and Emily Wants to Play 2. I assume that's a sequel to Emily Wants to Play. And you played that one, Matt.
Actually, it's an unrelated game.
I don't know.
That was a decent little horror game, wasn't it, Matt? The original, I mean?
It wasn't great.
Oh, okay. Well,
it was one of those horror games that's designed for like playing on Twitch in front of an audience. So lots of like jump scares and okay, not much else to it.
Okay, so we won't recommend that one. And then I don't know what this Sinner Sacrifice for Redemption is, but that's the last game that comes out. Game. Right, that's the last game that comes out on PS4 next month, and that's out on April 25. And sorry, I forgot to mention that Yakuza 6 actually comes out in April. It's easy for us journalists to figure that because we've been basically playing it for like 6 months now. But the review codes for that one went out really early, and the review's already live for it, obviously. But now consumers will get to play it, which is all you listeners, and that comes out on April 17, and that's certainly going to be the highlight for the month. So, except for Galgun. Galgun's the real highlight. That's going to be the same game, aren't they? They're pretty much really. Yeah. They're basically the same thing. So, Ginny, are you going to be a Galgun gal, or are you going to be a Yakuza fan if you haven't played it yet? Or what about some God of War? Which ones are your picks for the month?
Well, I'm already playing Yakuza, so and yeah, I mean, I guess it has a lot of similarities to Galgun too. I mean, you behave awkwardly around ladies and they take their shirts off. So I guess they're basically the same game. I'll be trying to play Galgun too, but it's probably going to be banned in my country. So that will really depend on whether or not our chief censor picks up on it.
It's going to be it's going to be a real miracle if that game actually gets out in Japan. I'm honestly shocked and surprised that it was.
I'm fairly certain it will
release in Australia.
It will be out in Japan, but in New Zealand it might be.
Sorry, New Zealand, not Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's early in the morning.
If it was banned in Japan, that would be a
travesty. Like, I don't know what they do.
A whole new level.
It would kill the franchise. But
I imagine it probably would.
It would, yeah. So I'm playing Yakuza 6: A Song of Life and Yakuza 6: Galgun 2, hopefully. I will not be playing South Park: The Fractured Butthole. I mean, if you're going to be playing it, good for you, I guess. But it's probably like the thing in the entire list that was furthest out of my interest sphere. Otherwise,
Yeah, I didn't mention that one for a reason, Jenny. I don't think.
Oh, right. Well, Detective Pikachu
Ooh,
is
love
out.
that.
Isn't it out this
Next week.
month? Yeah, Oh,
Yeah.
shit, don't worry. Okay.
Not an April game.
Forget about it.
Oh, never mind.
I will look very cautiously, I guess, at God of War. I mean, I've never liked the previous one, so I doubt this is going to sell me now, but people have been saying some really interesting things about it, so I guess I'm a little bit divided.
Well, Ginny, I don't think this new one is God of War in any other way other than name. So it's a completely different game as far as I can tell. So you could probably enjoy this if you didn't like the previous God of Wars. Which
I've been a bit weirded out
be...
by the discourse about like his son being like another weapon, like use my son to call out at monsters and risk his life so I can headshot something. Like I don't know, I'm kind of weird about that Kratos parenting dynamic aspect they tried to put in there. Like he's got a heart, but is using his son for bait. So I don't know. Maybe I'll give that one a hard pass, but definitely Yakuza and Galgun are the ones I'm going to be looking at the most closely.
As someone
Yeah,
who knows
it's really
nothing about God of War, what?
It's really weird. I did a interview. I had a chat with the well, I think it was the community manager. They dragged out to Australia as part of the promotion of God of War, and yeah, I had a chat with him, and he actually did talk about Atreus. I think that's his name. Kratos' son, and he was like, yeah, so in battles you've got 4 options for weapons, and you've got like your axe and something, and then Atreus, and I'm like, wait, what? And yeah, he really did frame Atreus as like a weapon for combat options, and I'm like, and then later on he was talking about how this is a really, touching story about Kratos learning to be a father and stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that most fathers would not want to use their son as a weapon.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a basic, one-on-one on good parenting there. But I don't know. I'm not a dad, so maybe you do use your kids as weapons. Maybe you do. It's just something I've just never been made aware of.
Just like dog fights at the back of the preschool, but it's kids.
Maybe you just never
Probably
know. I'm assuming.
I don't know.
I can guarantee it happens in Wollongong. Harvard, what about you? What games are you looking forward to in April? I know you're such a big fan of Galgun and all those kinds of super otaku games. So.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan service game kind of guy, but I mean, we've got 2 people from New Zealand on this podcast, so I kind of feel like I need to buy it out of solidarity. Support.
Please.
I guess all games should release in all regions.
Yes.
That's what I'm gonna say when someone looks at me on the train and is like, "What the hell are you playing?"
Well, that's the best thing of all. It's actually coming out on Switch, which means you can play it on the train, and everybody can see what you're playing, and they'll think you're really awesome for playing such a niche game. I just realized there might be some people on the podcast that don't, or listening in on the podcast that don't know what Galgun is. So maybe we should explain that.
Yeah.
Galgun.
Go for it, Matt.
Yeah, take point on this one.
Okay, how can I say this without sounding really creepy? Galgun is an on-rails shooter where you are a student at a high school, and for reasons, every girl in the high school decides that they want to crush on you pretty hard, and your only way of fending them off, their affections off, is to shoot them with a pheromone gun, which makes them really happy, and then they kind of melt away and leave you alone. And I guess the controversy from the game is that gun also has the ability to see through their clothes, and yeah, that's why it got banned in New Zealand and stuff. There we go. I did a pretty good job of that. So that's the game, and it's actually it's surprisingly. I mean, for all the reputation it has and all the nonsense and stuff, it's actually quite a good. Or the first one anyway was actually quite a good game. So I am legitimately looking forward to the next one to play it and stuff, but it's certainly going to raise eyebrows for other reasons. But yeah, go on, Harvard. What else are you looking forward to other than Galgun 2?
I think it's a bit of a catch-up
Oops.
for me. I mean, I do want to play Yakuza, but
That's a lot of robots.
Sorry. Yeah, we had a bit of technical issues there. So while we get Harvard to fix those, Matt, what are you looking forward to next month?
I am looking forward to Nintendo Labo mostly because that just looks like it's going to be so much fun. Just build stuff out of cardboard and turn my Switch into a robot or a motorbike or whatever else. Should be good times. I'm also obviously looking to Galgun 2 if I can get it before it gets banned in my country, because New Zealand's really special like that. And Yakuza 6, but I'm already playing that, so I don't know if that really counts. That's about all.
Yeah, but not Penny Punching Princess. I mean,
oh yes, Penny Punchy Princess.
Oh my god, I totally forgot that game.
Penny Punchy
Even though you just mentioned it, I want it as well.
Yeah, that game.
Yeah, it's really weird. I think it's kind of flying under people's radars and stuff. But without breaking embargoes, I am playing it a little bit now. I just started it, and it's worth looking forward to. Actually, it's worth grabbing. I don't know why people aren't paying much attention to it. Probably because it's that like really cheap-looking top-down game. But once you get into it, it's neat. It's very neat. So, yeah, that'll be a good way to start the month.
I'm not sure. I think I'm looking forward to Frostpunk as well.
What is that? Tell me. Talk me through it.
Like, I don't entirely know, and that's part of why I'm looking forward to it. It's like
Nice.
a sort of post-apocalyptic sort of city building game in a world that's been frozen over.
Okay, you just sold me on it.
It's an alternative timeline in the an alternative timeline in the summer of 1886 where snowstorms basically froze over the world and killed everyone.
Yeah, you sold me on that, especially the killed everyone bit.
It's kind of like a city builder / survival game in a steampunk sort of world. And that's about as much as I know about it, but I'm very intrigued about it. It's from 11-Bit Studios, who made This War of Mine.
Oh, well, I'm even more intrigued now because they do good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poland's other developer. Well, that's the thing. Everybody thinks Poland's like CD Projekt Red and Witcher and CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk, whatever it's called. But yeah, kicking along in the background, there is 11-Bit Studios doing some amazing stuff. And yeah, anything they do, I'm keen on. So thanks for introducing me to that one, Matt.
Yes, and those are the games I'm looking forward to.
Cool.
In
that's
April. It's a refreshingly quiet month. I
am right. Yeah, it is. It is quite a quiet month, isn't it? It's especially for those of us who have knocked off Yakuza. There's just not that much stuff coming out, which is great.
I'm vaguely curious about God of War, but also, like Ginny, I've never liked any of the other ones that I've played, and so this one looks it might be interesting. But
once again, if you stop thinking of it as a God of War game and more as a child fighting simulation,
and see that's the part that appeals to me.
That just elevates it to the next level, where you just add children and death and screaming. It's just that's a AAA game right there. That's the standard.
To be honest, the main thing that appeals to me about it is the comments that I've seen from certain sections of the. I don't want to say community, but certain people who are very mad because it's a very gone so politically correct because they've got a child in the game now, and that's just obscenely politically correct.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
It's the SJW game now.
Yeah, SJW game
Dogfighting children, the favorite hobby of the SJW.
Oh yes, I found the comment I was referring to. Okay, God of War 2018 is like decaf coffee. God of War is about a reckless dude killing and smashing stuff with awesome chain blades and cruel finishes. When I think Kratos, I do not think of an old, self-reflecting parent with an obnoxious sidekick son that I want to kill within the first 3 minutes of the game.
Jesus.
I think of vengeance delivered in the most gruesome way. I think of fatal fury in your face. This game looks like they tried to put as much political correctness in a game as possible.
Oh, God.
Right.
So,
okay, so on that note, we might go to some music from a game that guy would definitely not enjoy, When the Water Tastes Like Wine, which is a open world visual novel. Is that characterizing it fairly right, Matt? Because you're the one who reviewed it.
That characterizes it perfectly.
Yeah, so open world visual novel, very very artsy, very lovely, great soundtrack, and probably boring to the guy that finds the new God of War an SJW game, I imagine. And welcome back. Okay, so for the second section of the podcast this week, I wanted to talk about, well, the fact I'm kind of an old dude, I guess, now.
You've been talking about that a lot lately, Matt.
I feel it. I feel it in my bones. This week, I came to the realization that I've been writing about video games for 15 years at least. And that was a little bit surprising and shocking and soul-crushing, I guess. But the reason that I wanted to bring it up for this podcast is I wanted to talk about the moment that we all realized that video games were not just something that we threw on when we were bored or on a lazy Sunday afternoon to to waste some time, or it was the moment that kind of games became something that we took more seriously than just a kind of passive hobby, and why we still review them, because all of us have been writing about or talking about games for quite a while now, and yeah, it's always good to look back and get nostalgic at times. So we'll start with Harvard, since he didn't get much of a chance to talk last section thanks to his technical issues. So for you, Harvard, what was kind of the game or games or moment that you kind of decided that you wanted to write about them, and that it was something that you wanted to dedicate a significant amount of your time to?
I think when I was a kid, I did play games, but it was all like licensed titles. I wasn't really thinking about what's good and what's bad in a game. So I think when I was in high school and I started buying my own games, I started thinking about what makes one good, what makes one bad. But the one that really changed everything was this game called Kentucky Route Zero, which was thematically so interesting and so deep that it made me want to look more into games as a medium. But also, the first game I wrote for DDNet was the Friday When Monsters Attack.
Oh, that's the little Japanese one that was on the 3DS.
Yeah,
Attack of the Friday Monsters.
Yeah, Attack of the Friday Monsters, yeah.
Nobody look up that review. That is young me. But yeah, that's a
Attack of the Friday Monsters DDNet review.
Yeah, I remember you writing that one, and you actually sold me on giving it a go, Harvard. And yeah, it's a really great game. Easy to forget, unfortunately. But when you play it, you think like this is an amazing little title. So yeah, that's a good way to start your writing career, I guess. That was a good game to kick off with. What about you, Ginny? How long have you been doing games for?
Oh dear. So actually, I guess formally not that long, like being paid to do games things, probably only about 3 years. But I've been writing about them like just sort of on my own shitty blog and like in like various other places just sort of around the internet, probably for about close to 5-6 years. And for me, it was, I know I joked about it being Sonic Adventure 2. That was the moment that made me realize how much I love games. It was actually probably playing World of Warcraft. So I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft. Not because it's like a riveting game with a great narrative, because I know it's not. But it was just, I used to get really sucked into the lore of Warcraft when I was a hardcore fan. And by hardcore, I mean like raiding 3 times a week, multiple hours at a time, sort of like sucking up the rest of my life type playing. And it was actually people being super, super toxic in World of Warcraft that made me think about how games are received in the community. Like, I remember I was in a guild and some people were just like really, really toxic all the time, using like racial slurs and stuff just continuously. And I was like, wow, this is really shitty. Like, why are you guys like this? And I kind of like looked around at the game that I was playing. I had like an out of body experience. I was like, man, these people are dickheads. Like, this is terrible. And then I wondered whether or not like the game itself had elements in it that like influenced how people treated each other. And like, while I love World of Warcraft, still it's got a place in my heart. Like, every expansion is like inciting fanatic racism like between the races. Like there's all this racial conflict all the time. There are literal ghettos in games, and certain races get stereotyped and typecast as, as quote unquote slaves or quote unquote lesser. And there's like just full on like this genocide in one expansion just about, how people are eliminated because they're not the purest race. Like, I'm not even making this shit up. Like, if you look up World of Warcraft and read the plot, this is what happens. And I think about the blasé attitude that the game has towards like horrific violence against, I guess, the people of color, or the analogy for people of color in the game. And I go, you know what? It's not that unbelievable that people feel this way and hold these sentiments against people that they sort of like relate to as a real world analogy of how they receive these races. And so I kind of started looking at other games more critically after that, because I got I spent some time away from the World of Warcraft franchise for a while and played other things that weren't soul-sucking ways to spend my time. And I sort of started looking more at how RPGs in general and how those plots and how world building and how sort of quote unquote fantasy racism is like a huge issue. And then so I started writing a bunch of pieces about diversity in games. They're like really basic, horrible stuff. Please don't look my name up and look at my WordPress account. Like seriously, it's horrific.
WordPress.
Because like I would just write all this stuff, all of these like random thoughts about how I felt about people being represented in games. And I sort of did that for years and years in my own way, like in my own completely informal way. And then, yeah, I guess when I finally wrote a formal piece on it and sort of name dropped a bunch of AAA games and like critiqued how they saw diversity, that was kind of when I started moving into the journalism sphere, I guess, when I started critiquing games on the reg. So yeah, it was World of Warcraft and its toxic ass people that made me realize.
And then you started playing Galgun.
Yeah, and I started playing Galgun. Yeah, so that's the story from World of Warcraft to Galgun, the G story.
Okay, that's yeah. I've never played, or I played World of Warcraft for like 10 minutes, I think, before realizing it wasn't for me. But yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and yeah, cool.
I've played World of Warcraft for like many hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
And I'd never really thought about it in those terms, which is weird because it's very obvious. Like the whole point of the game is about creating these sort of racial conflict as a game mechanic, basically.
Yeah.
And I have very fond memories of going and harassing players from the other side while they were just trying to like do their quests and level and stuff, and I was just playing a rogue and then hiding out in stealth while they were trying to collect their animal hides or whatever the quest was from them, and then just jumping out on players far lower level than me and killing them for no reason and then laughing. And that was what World of Warcraft was for a long time.
Right, yeah, interesting. Well, was World of Warcraft the game for you, Matt, as well, or was there something else?
No, that
really
was
kind of
the game that I played for many hundreds of hours because I was a nerd. For me, it was probably, and you're going to hate me for this, Matt, it's not Sonic, but it's the next best thing, which is Metal Gear Solid 3. And
Kojima.
Which I still maintain is a very good game, and I tend to agree with you that Kojima is what's the diplomatic way of putting this?
In love with himself.
Yes, there's that. And not very good at what he does. It's more recently, but I think Metal Gear Solid 3 in particular was kind of, I guess, a game that showed me that games could be more than just fun games, fun of like pressing buttons and killing people, and just in the way it told its story about sort of, I guess, the toxicity of patriotism and like how it basically challenged the whole idea of like being a soldier is the like greatest thing you can do for your country, and basically just turned that on its head by having with a story about how do I say it's difficult even to sum up, but basically it's about
you can't really do it in a couple of minutes, that's for sure. It is like, in all fairness to Kojima, and I don't like him, Metal Gear Solid 3 is a complex game for sure. I can totally see that it would be a game that would get a lot of people thinking about the deeper context of narrative and stuff in video games.
And just about like war in general, which I think was something that Kojima always wanted to criticize in his games, but hasn't always been good at doing that. But I think that was the one where all the various things came together really well to tell a
Sure.
very moving story. And so that was the one that really got me first thinking about that sort of stuff. And another one is, I think, one of the first games that I ever wrote about. This is going back about 5 or 6 years ago now, so I'm not as old hat as you, Matt. Was Papo and Yo. I don't know if you've ever played that.
Ah, yes, the
PlayStation
Brazilian. No,
3.
sorry. Well, he's Brazilian, but he's Canadian. He's based in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a game that a very sort of arty game about, well, very blatantly about like domestic abuse and growing up with an abusive father, but kind of presented in a sort of fantasy context about this little kid in growing up in like the slums of Brazil, and who finds this and sort of befriends this monster, and he's trying to, gosh, it's so long since I played that, I can't even remember what the goal of it is. I think he's trying to save his friend or something. But anyway, he befriends this monster who basically is the key to solving the game's puzzles and combat and stuff. But then sometimes when things happen, the monster just turns on him and becomes like another enemy that he can't fight, and instead of helping to solve all the puzzles, he just starts getting in the way and trying to eat you, basically. And so it was a very, I guess, creative and interesting analogy for that, you know, that not being able to trust the person that you should be able to trust the most of all, and somebody who's supposed to be there to like guide you through life and show you the way.
Yeah.
When for no fault of your own, something happens and then they just turn on you, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And so I think that was another game that really, as I said, that was, I think, one of the first games I wrote about, and that really got me started in all this game writing nonsense. So I have a lot to thank for that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, I started out writing about Game Boy Advance games way back when. I wasn't necessarily taking it so seriously back then. I basically just wanted the free games because didn't have much money, and writing a review was a good way of getting a game to play. For me, it was probably, I mean, the one that sticks out, it probably wasn't the first game I took seriously as a work of art or whatever, but the first game that really sticks out for me and I remember taking quite seriously was Final Fantasy X, actually, funnily enough. And the reason I took it seriously was because I wrote essays on it for one of my classes at university. I was doing media at the time, and we're looking at kind of new media and stuff, and how narrative and whatever was appropriated for video games. And I did that one. I chose that one. So that was the first time I think I wrote a serious essay on a video game. For the other one that really stuck out for me, I was doing a course on theatre, actually, and it was, what was it called? It was about transgressive theatre and kind of alternative. And the reason I took the course was because the course description had a disclaimer. There's a potential of being offended. What in this class, in this course, if you do this course, you'll see things that you probably don't want to see.
Are you saying they used being offensive to advertise this course, and you?
Yeah, pretty much. And I was always very easy to sell on that. I've always been that kind of person. I like to put myself out there and see stuff that I probably shouldn't. As part of that course, where we studied like Antony Nato and Theatre of Tragedy and Jet of Blood and all kinds of weird stuff, Stellark and body hacking and all kinds of really weird stuff in that course. I had an excuse to look at a game called Clock Tower 3, actually, which is a horror game, which had the involvement of one of Japan's greatest transgressive filmmakers, did the directing of the cutscenes and stuff. So I had an excuse to look at that game and start to pull it apart. And it's actually it was a game that reviewed quite poorly. And I guess that was the moment I realized that I shouldn't pay attention to reviews. And I say that as a reviewer that would want people to pay attention to my stuff. But that was one of those first times where I realized that what I was seeing in a game didn't necessarily gel with what everybody else was writing about, and that the critics were looking at stuff that I didn't necessarily. I thought they looked at it as a fairly shallow. The reviews and stuff on that game were fairly shallow, because it's actually quite a smart and well-made narrative and transgressive experience as such. And yeah, from that moment, I mean, when I write about weird-ass games now, it's probably because I did that course and saw things that probably broke me, and now I'm just a mess. So speaking of weird games, yeah, I've always done weird art, and I guess that was probably where it started. But speaking of weird stuff, we'll listen to some music from Danganronpa now. I think that's a creative game, that's for sure. And good soundtrack, and we'll come back and we'll talk about something. Not sure what yet.
2, 1, 2. E is all that remains of a once powerful yokai. Right now, you're on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. 1, 2, 1, 2. E is all that remains of a once powerful yokai. Right now, you're on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. 1, 2, 1, 2. E is all that remains of a once powerful yokai. Right now, you're on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. 1, 2, 1, 2. E is all that remains of a once powerful yokai. Right now, you're on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. 1, 2, 2, 3. Is all that remains of a once powerful yokai. Right now, you're on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so for the last section of the podcast, we'll do our usual thing where we talk about one game in depth. And this week, we've decided to talk about Okami because it's a very good art game and stuff. And it's coming out relatively soon for Nintendo Switch, so it's fairly topical, I guess. And we just wanted to talk about it because, yeah, really great game. And well, I think the thing is that people always chalk it up as like a Zelda clone, and it's not. It has some vague similarities, I guess, to how the Zelda games play, or it's got some fairly explicit, I guess, similarities to how the Zelda games play. But I don't know, anybody who plays that game and thinks, hey, this is like Zelda, is kind of not paying attention, I think, to the narrative or the art style or basically anything that's actually important to the game. So I think those people have opinions that are kind of invalid. But yeah, I mean, for you guys, what about Okami kind of really attracts you? What's the main, if you were to think about Okami and what you like about it, what's the thing that really pulled you in and kind of kept you playing it?
Well, I really like Zelda games.
Oh, Matt.
Yeah, just mutes you from here on out. He's like,
Yeah, that's it. I do have control over who gets muted.
Yeah. No, I do. I see your point, but I kind of disagree with you in that I think it's Okami is very obviously inspired by Zelda and sort of just the design and the structure of it. But then it's used that sort of formula to tell a much more interesting story. And yeah, and so for me, I guess it's the way I enjoy that sort of Zelda-ish progression of going through dungeons and getting the different tools, building up your skills so you can solve all the different puzzles. But then the story and the presentation and all that is kind of brings it all together much better than a typical Zelda game does. And so for me, it's the best of both worlds.
Well, see, the thing is, for me, and maybe it's just the way I look at games is different to people, I've realized. But but like Okami for me is very much the Japanese mythology and the Japanese artistic heritage, and you know, the even the paintbrush mechanics, which are such a major part of Okami, come from traditional brushwork in Japanese art. And all of those things are the kind of things that I fixate on when I play Okami. And obviously none of that is in a Zelda game. So I don't see the link. I see some, like I said, I see the vague kind of resemblance in how they play and the way that they're structured, in that, you know, you'll go into a dungeon and you'll get a new skill or an item or something which you'll use to solve puzzles, and then you'll have a boss fight, and then you'll go back out into the open world or the large world, talk to some characters, get a plot point, and then go to the next dungeon. But for me, that's something that's common to a lot of games. You could say that kind of applies to even something like Final Fantasy, the typical Final Fantasy games. So I don't necessarily see that link that people see between these two games. And that's probably because what I'm kind of looking at in Okami is not in a Zelda game. It's not in any of them, really. So yeah, maybe I'm just weird. Maybe I'm just too strange to do this game thing. But yeah, that's I guess where I see the differences. What about you, Ginny? Are you a Okami is Zelda person, or do I actually have somebody who agrees with me on something?
Well, weirdly enough, we're going to agree on this one, Matt. Even
Yay,
though we had
finally!
a disagreement yesterday about the best Armello character, in which I'm convinced you're still wrong. But no, I think for me, it definitely is something similar to the way that Matt Sainsbury sees it. I just think the aesthetic and cultural inspiration differences are just so great that I'd never thought to like think about them in that way in the first place. And for me, it mainly is the paintbrush element of it, and also I think the heavy mythology elements that you have in Okami, which are not present in Zelda. Obviously, Zelda has its own, you know, like deities and like antagonists and whatnot, but I think like the liberal use of the Japanese zodiac pantheon in the games, and I think the sort of constant positioning. I think I feel like Link as the chosen figure and his characterization is not anywhere close to how I think Amaterasu is viewed and portrayed in the game, and sort of like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the way that the two characters are framed is incredibly different. So
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that the mythology of it and the Japaneseness of it is not important, and that's, I think, is as much of what appeals to me about it as anything else. But I mean, I think the more, and also, I mean, I played this for the first time last year when it came out on PS4, and so at this point, the whole Okami is the best Zelda game kind of discourse was already like well entrenched. So maybe that influenced the way I thought about it. But it's just in the that structure of it, and the way you use the brushes, the brush abilities sort of as your abilities that affect how you navigate the world. And yeah, as you were saying, Matt, that is something that's common to a lot of games, broadly speaking, but in Zelda games and other games that are more closely inspired by it, like, I mean, even Metroid and other things like that, it's a very particular loop of, or particular aspect of the way those abilities allow you to interact with the environment. So it's not just, oh, you found a key and you need this particular red key to open the red door, and now you found it so you can go through. It's sort of the way how do I put this? Like, I mean, you've got the bomb, and so now you've got this ability to create the bombs, so now you can destroy things that you can destroy walls that you couldn't before, or you've got the creating the lily pads on water, so now that lets you cross waterways that you couldn't. It's that sort of feeling of not just unlocking doors, but changing how you directly interact with the world around you, which then serves as, in a backwards way, like the key to unlocking new parts of the game. And I think that's the very Zelda-like thing that Okami brings across. But yeah, as you said, it is much. Well, that's all wrapped in all the Japanese mythology and everything, which I think ties that whole mechanic together a lot better than any Zelda games do.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Like I said, it's not so much I would say that. I mean, I'm not denying that people see a link between Okami and Zelda games. I just personally don't see it, I think. But yeah, I think like you, I only actually played it for the first time when it came out on the PS4 last year. For the longest time, funnily enough, I was actually put off it because people kept comparing it to Zelda, and other than Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, I haven't been the biggest fan of Zelda over the years. Or Link's Awakening too, I guess. But you know, the more recent Zelda games kind of put me off that formula as such. So I put off playing Okami for the longest time. And then I had the opportunity to review it, obviously. So I picked it up and gave it a go. And yeah, I just remember being kind of blown away by how not Zelda it felt to me. So, I mean, for me, the thing that obviously it's the mythology that I really love. Amaterasu is, in the Japanese mythology, is basically the most important deity. And she is the sun god, and very important character. And then throughout the game, you keep meeting characters that are important to Japanese history or mythology. Isun, as annoying as little bugger is in the game, is a pretty important character to actual Japanese mythology. Basically everything that you come across in the game. Kaguya, Princess Kaguya is one of the most important stories that every Japanese person knows or learns from a very young age, and so on and so forth. And I don't know, after playing this game, I kept finding myself, hitting up Wikipedia for additional bits of information and seeing where the references in the game come from, and just double checking the bits that I already knew about how they were portrayed in the game. And yeah, that was really interesting for me. I always like a game that's got cultural relevance, and that's certainly something that I've never felt like doing playing a Zelda game. I think those games exist kind of independent of real world storytelling. What about the art style? What do you guys think of how the game is done? Because it's every time the Capcom re-releases it, they do a HD or remaster or upgrade it or whatever. But it's a game that you could play the original and it would still look as good as basically it looks now, because it seems to me to be something that's much more art direction focused than anything in terms of technical construction.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's
it looks so good. Yeah.
And I get really mad when people especially with the PS4 version, lots of people were talking about how it looks really bad now, and they haven't remastered it enough. And I'm like, what? It looks better than any other PS4 game. It looks better than Horizon or whatever other games are on PS4.
It does, doesn't it? Like I remember being absolutely weirded out because I took little videos, as I tend to do when I'm playing games, and as everybody who knows me on Twitter knows that I just, whenever you know what game I'm playing when I play a game, because I'm always sticking screenshots and videos up on Twitter. But yeah, I remember putting up videos of Okami as I was playing it, and people were like, "Wait, that's the HD remaster." Like, they were disappointed, and I was like, "What are you talking about? How can you complain about this game? It's gorgeous." It's weird because it's got that. It's obviously got that hand-drawn aesthetic to it, and it looks like it's rough in the sense that the characters are hazy. They're constantly kind of like the lines that draw the characters are always kind of, it looks like it's kind of a flipbook animation that somebody's put together, where each line's been drawn for every frame, and once you flip them all together, once you start going through them at speed, it doesn't have that kind of clean lines of some other games. But that's obviously an aesthetic choice, and once you start playing it, it becomes quite gorgeous. So yeah, I found it really weird that people were not immediately impressed by how good the game looks. Again, I hadn't played it before, so this was all new to me, and other people maybe were expecting something else, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think people in this day and age now confuse like high fidelity graphics for good aesthetic design. And it kind of makes me sad that Okami is being received in this way by people that had never played it before. Because I feel like it's sold horrifically. And it should have sold so much better because it is undeniably basically 90% artful aesthetic and 90%, I don't know, an incredible way to introduce people to Japanese culture and Japanese mythology. Like what you were saying, Matt, I think the game is like a vehicle for this sort of cultural education and awakening. And I think, I don't know, I just feel like it's one of those games that if I had to recommend a game that everyone has to play, I would just pick this one. It would be on my list of games that people always have to play because it does a great job of telling a story, using a game as a vehicle, but without sort of using overdone tropes or, I suppose, conflicts in game to establish a point. Like there's combat there, there's cliche plot there, there's undeniable fan service elements there, or at least some blurry polygon that looks like a chest, and there's sort of meta commentary there on sexuality and stuff like that. And I just feel like all of it is done in a way that is inviting and welcoming, and it feels like a game that is not a chore to play at all. And I think people are going to miss out on that, which makes me really sad, even though it's being remastered for Switch. So if you're listening and haven't played it, can you please buy this game?
Well, there's a
Buy
lot of
this
people.
game.
There's,
Buy this game.
there's probably a lot of people who are listening who probably never played it because it has sold horrifically. Like every time that Capcom's taken a shot at releasing it again, I always wonder if the reason that it doesn't sell well is it's too Japanese. I wonder if it's the kind of game where people look at it and just assume that they're not going to understand it, or that it's, maybe people feel like it requires too much back knowledge about Japanese art and history and mythology to really connect with. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sold. I assume it's sold better in Japan itself, where perhaps there's more familiarity with what it's doing and saying, but. And perhaps Zelda sells better out west. Well, I know Zelda sells well in Japan as well, but perhaps Zelda's kind of a global product because it has that more bland aesthetic.
Well,
I just
actually-
lost half our audience. I know. Yeah, I don't know. It's Zelda always strikes me as being quite neutral and flat in aesthetic. That it's kind of. It's designed to be generic so that everybody can connect with it, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing it for that, but I definitely think Okami is designed with one specific aesthetic in mind, and it's very cultural, and perhaps people who would not be inclined to go to, for instance, an exhibition of Japanese art at a museum or whatever, perhaps those people, which is probably the majority of people out west, would not consider this to be a game that looks pleasing to them.
I think it's probably worth noting a little bit as well that Okami Den, the game about Chibitarasu, which is like the baby Amaterasu, sold decently, apparently, compared to the first game. Maybe because it was like a puppy instead of a dog, and puppies have this sort of weird primal human need. So maybe if they remaster Okami Den, they will see a resurgence as well in interest in the franchise. Just putting it out there. I think
I would like to see a remaster of Okami Den because I've never played. There was one that was on
DS.
DS, yeah.
So adorable. The most adorable thing I've seen, because all the zodiac animals are like the children of the regular ones. It is so cute. It's just, and I think that feels more like a Zelda game because they've sort of scaled the maps down and have more dungeony sequences. You operate yourself and an external character separately, and like to activate switches and whatnot, and draw things and sort of create things. So I think that one, I guess I can see a case for the link to Zelda-ness in terms of like the dungeons, quote unquote, and the segments of the game where you have to stealth or camouflage yourself and role play through sections. So that, I guess, is a Zelda game. I don't know. I feel like that has more mainstream Zelda elements. So if anyone that works on Okami Den is listening to this, can you please bring it to the Switch?
Hideki Kamiya, if you're listening to this podcast,
he's gonna block us.
He's gonna block us on
He's
Twitter.
gonna block us, but please bring Okami Den to the Switch. We're counting on you.
Or perhaps he could start working on a new Okami, since they keep releasing the old one. And if they are going to keep copying Zelda, maybe they can copy Breath of the Wild and do an open world Okami with Amaterasu, running around. Mind you, I probably wouldn't play that so much because I'd get stuck on the introductory plateau,
God,
just like I did with Breath of the Wild, and not be able to figure out how to get to the
you give the
frozen temple in the top of the mountain. I keep freezing every time I try and go up there, and I can't finish the bloody tutorial because I'm stuck. And I hate that game. I hate that game. Fucking Zelda. I don't know what other people have seen. They say this is the best game on the Switch. I'm like, bugger off. It's Fire Emblem. Okay, on that note, usually we'd finish a podcast with a bit of music from the game that we picked to talk about, but this week we do something different and pick a track that was actually used as the basis of an entire game, funnily enough. So at the moment I'm playing a game called Last Day of June, which just came out on the Nintendo Switch. Apparently it's been around for a while now, but it's a new game on Switch, and I'm playing it. And it was actually based on a song by a guy called Stephen something. I can't remember his name now.
Was it Stephen Wilson?
Stephen Wilson, who's an indie English rock musician. And yeah, this song was actually used as the basis of that game. So it's a really lovely song. It's a really lovely game, and I just wanted to finish the podcast by recommending it without talking about it too much. So enjoy, and we will see you at the next podcast. Thanks everybody for being on it. That was a good one. Catch you later.
To clear away all the jets out in your brain and face the truth. Well, I can make amends, but while the darkness always ends, you're still alone. So try. Clear away all the jets in your brain and face the truth.